The credit card declined, right there at Murphy's Steakhouse, with Carol's in-laws watching. I'm Bruce Coleman, 58, been building houses for 32 years until my back gave out last spring, and I was sitting 3 tables away watching my own daughter's face turn red as the waiter handed back my emergency card. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. Carol had texted me that morning, "Sorry, Dad, can't do dinner tonight. Tyler's sick and Kyle's got a fever. Rain check?" I'd been looking forward to our monthly father-daughter dinner for weeks. Been doing it since her mom, Margaret, passed 4 years ago, trying to keep the family together, you know? These dinners were about the only time Carol and I really talked anymore, just the two of us. So there I was at Murphy's anyway. Figured I'd grab a beer and watch the Cowboys game. The place was packed, typical Friday night crowd. Sports memorabilia covered every wall, signed jerseys, old football helmets, the works. I'd claimed my usual spot at the bar, ordered a Budweiser, and settled in to watch Dallas hopefully not embarrass themselves again. That's when I spotted her. My daughter Carol, 34 years old, sitting at the best table in the house. The corner booth by the window, the one that costs extra and usually needs reservations weeks in advance. She was with Tyler's parents, Rex and Beverly Murphy. Not a sick person in sight. She was laughing like she didn't have a care in the world, raising a glass of what looked like expensive champagne. The kind of champagne I used to buy Margaret for anniversaries, back when money wasn't so tight. Tyler was there too, wearing a watch I'd never seen before. Gold looked real heavy, the kind of watch that costs more than most people make in a month. Kyle was nowhere around, probably with a babysitter they'd paid for with money I was starting to suspect came from my wallet. I sat there nursing my beer, trying to process what I was seeing. Carol had been telling me for months how tight money was. Tyler lost his sales job 6 months back, she said. They were struggling with the mortgage, couldn't afford daycare for Kyle, living off her part-time graphic design work. That's why I'd given her my emergency credit card back in the spring. Just for groceries and necessities, honey. Until Tyler gets back on his feet. I remember that day clearly. Carol had come over to my house, Kyle on her hip, tears in her eyes. "Dad, I don't know what we're going to do. Tyler's unemployment isn't enough, and I can barely get 10 hours a week of design work. We might lose the apartment. What kind of father says no to that?" I'd worked construction for 32 years, saved every penny I could for retirement. But seeing my daughter struggle, seeing my grandson maybe going hungry, I handed over that card without hesitation. But looking at their table now, I saw plates of prime rib that had to cost $45 each. Lobster tails the size of my fist. Sides that cost more than I spend on groceries in a week. The champagne bottle had a label I couldn't read from where I sat. But knowing Murphy's prices, it wasn't the $12 stuff from the grocery store. The waiter at their table looked familiar. Shane, I think his name was. I'd seen him here before during my solo dinners after Margaret died. He always mentioned putting things on the Coleman tab when I came in for my monthly splurge. Made sense then, when it was just me ordering a burger and fries. Doesn't make sense now, watching him serve what looked like a feast to 4 people. Something cold settled in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, the one my neighbor's kid had helped me set up after Margaret passed. What I saw made my blood pressure spike higher than it had been since my last physical. Transaction after transaction at Murphy's over the past 3 months. $480 here, $620 there, $390 for another family dinner I was never invited to. The emergency card I'd given her for groceries and necessities had been used for 11 different steakhouse meals, each one showing 4 to 6 people on the receipt. Each one adding up to more than I spent on food in 2 weeks. Total damage, $4,200. That's more than a month and a half of my retirement pension. Money I'd been saving by eating ramen and canned soup for lunch, skipping my usual Friday night dinners here, putting off buying new work boots, even though my old ones had holes that let in water every time it rained. I stared at the numbers on my phone screen, checking them twice to make sure I wasn't seeing things wrong, but there they were clear as day. 11 different charges at Murphy's Steakhouse, each one bigger than what I'd spend on a week's worth of groceries. Each one charged to the emergency card I'd given my daughter to keep her family from going hungry. While I was eating microwave dinners and generic cereal, Carol was apparently living like royalty, with Tyler's parents no less. People who, from the look of Beverly's jewelry and Rex's expensive suit, didn't need anyone else picking up their dinner tab. I did what any construction foreman would do when he catches someone stealing from the job site. I documented everything, took pictures of their table from my phone, making sure to get Carol's face clearly visible along with Tyler and his parents. Screenshots of my banking app showing every transaction. Even recorded a short video of Carol laughing with her champagne glass raised. Tyler's gold watch catching the restaurant's dim lighting. evidence. If 32 years of managing construction sites taught me anything, it's that you always need documentation when someone's screwing you over. Whether it's a contractor cutting corners on materials or a worker showing up drunk, you document everything. Paper trail beats he said, she said every time. I sat there for another 10 minutes, methodically building my case. The photos showed Carol and Tyler's expensive clothes, jewelry, the spread of food that cost more than most families spend on groceries in a month. The bank records showed the pattern, the frequency, the escalating amounts. This wasn't desperation spending on groceries. This was a lifestyle funded by my retirement savings. My hands were steady as I worked my phone, steadier than they'd been since Margaret's diagnosis. Back then, everything felt out of control, like watching a house collapse in slow motion and being powerless to stop it, but this was something I could handle. This was a problem with a solution. I walked over to Dale Foster, the manager, known him for 15 years, ever since Margaret and I started coming here for anniversaries. Dale's a straight shooter, the kind of guy who'd run a construction crew if he wasn't running a restaurant. Dale, I said, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't carry to Carol's table, I need a favor. Can you print me the receipts for all the charges on my card over the past 3 months? His eyebrows went up like I just asked him to violate health codes. Bruce, that's irregular. We don't usually hand out customer records. So is someone using my emergency card for fancy dinners while telling me they can't afford groceries? I replied, matching his quiet tone. The account's in my name, Dale. I have the right to see where my money's going, don't I? Dale's eyes flicked over to Carol's table, then back to me. I could see the understanding dawning in his expression. He'd been in the service industry long enough to recognize family drama when it walked through his doors. Jesus, Bruce, your daughter looks that way? He shook his head slowly. Give me 5 minutes. I'll print everything we have. While Dale disappeared into the back office, I called my bank. The customer service rep, Linda, sounded young but professional when she picked up. Mr. Coleman, how can I help you tonight? Linda, I need to report possible unauthorized use of one of my credit cards. Can you walk me through my options? Absolutely, sir. Can you tell me the nature of the unauthorized charges? I explained the situation, keeping my voice clinical and factual. The card was given for emergencies and groceries. It was being used for luxury dining without my knowledge or approval. The person using it was a family member who had been lying about the purchases. Mr. Coleman, I can freeze that card immediately if you suspect unauthorized use. I can also set up transaction alerts, so you'll know the moment anyone tries to use it. Not yet on the freeze, I said, checking my watch. 8:35 p.m. Their dinner was winding down, but they hadn't paid yet. But can you set up those alerts? And can you program a freeze to activate at a specific time? Yes, sir. What time would you like the freeze to activate? I watched Carol's table. Shane was refilling their water glasses, which in my experience at Murphy's meant they'd be getting the check soon. Tyler was leaning back in his chair, that satisfied look people get when they've had a good meal they didn't pay for. 8:45 p.m., I said. Right on the dot. Done, mister. Coleman, you'll receive text alerts for any transaction attempts, and the card will be frozen at exactly 8:45 p.m. I thanked Linda and hung up just as Dale returned with a manila envelope thick enough to choke a horse. Last 3 months, he said quietly, sliding it across the bar like he was passing state secrets. Bruce, I had no idea she wasn't. I mean, she always said you were covering it. Always mentioned how generous you were, how family takes care of family. The irony hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Carol had been using my generosity as a selling point, probably telling the Murphys what a great father-in-law I was, how I insisted on treating them to nice dinners. Meanwhile, I'd been home eating bologna sandwiches and wondering why my daughter never had time to visit anymore. I opened the envelope and spread the receipts across the bar. 11 receipts, each one showing meals for 4 to 6 people. Appetizers like oysters Rockefeller at $18 for 6 pieces. Shrimp cocktail at $20, entrees running $60–$80 per plate, prime rib, lobster tail filet mignon. Wine that cost more per bottle than I used to spend on groceries in a week. But it wasn't just the money, it was the pattern. Every single receipt showed the same thing. Carol playing hostess to Tyler's parents, using my emergency fund to buy their approval and respect. Each dinner was bigger than the last, more expensive, more elaborate, like she was trying to prove something. I thought about the conversations we'd had over those 3 months. Carol calling me, voice tight with stress, talking about how hard it was to make ends meet. How Tyler's job search wasn't going well, how they might have to move in with his parents if things didn't turn around soon. How humiliated she felt having to ask for help. All lies, every single word. While she was crying poor to me, she was living like a queen with the Murphys. While I was cutting back on everything to make sure my emergency fund stayed topped off for her real emergencies, she was treating it like her personal entertainment budget. My phone buzzed, 8:43 p.m. 2 minutes to go. I watched their table like a hawk watching prey. Shane was walking over with the check presenter, that black leather folder that meant the moment of truth was here. Tyler reached for his wallet out of habit, then stopped and said something to Carol. She smiled that confident smile I remembered from when she was little and knew she could talk her way out of trouble. She reached into her purse and pulled out my emergency card. My card. The one I'd given her 6 months ago when she stood in my kitchen with tears in her eyes telling me she didn't know how they'd make rent that month. 8:45 p.m. on the dot. My phone chimed with a text alert. Shane walked back to their table 30 seconds later, that apologetic look waiters get when they have to deliver bad news. He leaned down and spoke quietly to Tyler, probably trying to be discreet about it, but I could see Carol's smile vanish from across the room. I could see Tyler's face flush red as he started patting his pockets like his wallet might magically produce $600. I could see Rex and Beverly Murphy exchange that look married couples share when they realize they're about to be stuck with a check they weren't expecting to pay. That's when I knew it was time. I finished my beer in one long pull, left a $10 tip for my bartender, and walked over to their table. Each step felt deliberate, like walking across a job site where you know someone's about to get fired. "Evening, folks," I said, my voice carrying just enough to reach the nearby tables. "Enjoying your dinner?" The reaction was immediate and telling. Carol went white as drywall primer. Tyler bolted upright in his chair like someone had stuck him with a live wire. Rex cleared his throat and straightened his tie. Beverly looked down at her half-finished lobster tail like it might provide an escape route. "Dad," Carol started, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "Well, honey, since you canceled our dinner because Tyler was sick and Kyle had a fever, I figured I'd come eat alone. Watch the game, you know?" Imagine my surprise when I spotted you over here, looking healthier than I've seen you in months. I pulled out the manila envelope and set it on their table, right between the wine glasses and the leftover prime rib. The gesture was deliberate, like laying blueprints on a work table before explaining why a project's over budget. "These are receipts for every time you've used my emergency card here over the past 3 months. 11 dinners, $4,200 total. Not bad for someone who can't afford groceries." The silence that followed was deafening. Other diners were starting to notice our little family reunion. Shane stood frozen halfway between their table and the kitchen, still holding my declined credit card like it was evidence in a murder trial. Rex Murphy was the first to speak, his voice careful and controlled. "Bruce, I think there might be some misunderstanding here." "No misunderstanding, Rex," I replied, keeping my tone respectful but firm. "The numbers are right there in black and white. Your son and daughter-in-law have been telling me they're struggling to put food on the table while treating you folks to $400 dinners on my dime." Beverly's face flushed red as her lobster. "We had no idea," Carol always said. "She said you insisted on covering these dinners, that it was your way of welcoming us to the family." I felt something twist in my chest, not anger exactly, but something colder, more final. "Did she tell you I insisted?" Because for the past 6 months, Carol's been calling me in tears about how tight money is, how Tyler lost his job, how they might lose their apartment, how humiliated she felt having to ask her old man for help. Tyler found his voice, though it came out shaky. "Mr. Coleman, we were going to pay you back. This isn't what it looks like." "What it looks like, Tyler, is that you've been out of work for 6 months while spending my retirement money on surf and turf. What it looks like is that my daughter has been lying to both of us, telling me you're broke and telling you that I'm happy to fund your lifestyle." I pulled out my phone and showed them the banking app, the screen displaying transaction after transaction. "See these dates? October 15th, November 3rd, November 18th. Every single one matches up with a night. Carol told me she was too stressed to have dinner with me, too overwhelmed to visit, too busy with a sick kid." Carol's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Dad, please, you're embarrassing us." "No, Carol, you embarrassed yourselves. I'm just making sure everyone understands who's been paying for the show." I turned back to Shane, who was still standing there looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Shane, I need you to split this check 4 ways. These 4 adults can figure out how to pay for their own dinner." "Sir, I'm not sure I can. The card's been frozen," I said, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Has been since 8:45. So unless someone else has a way to cover a $600 dinner, you'd better figure out how to divide it up." Tyler tried to take control of the situation. "Look, we can work this out as a family. This doesn't need to be a public spectacle." "You're right," I agreed. "It didn't need to be. But when you spend 6 months lying to family, sometimes the truth comes out in public places." I pulled out one of the receipts from the envelope, the big one from last month, $680 for dinner and drinks for 6 people. "This one's interesting. 6 people, but Kyle wasn't here. So who was the extra guest that night? Carol's silence was answer enough, but Beverly filled it in. Tyler's sister came up from Houston. We wanted to show her a nice time on my emergency credit card, while telling me you couldn't afford to fix your oven. The weight of that hit the table like a sledgehammer. I watched the realization spread across Rex and Beverly's faces. They were learning about their son's deception in real time, in front of a restaurant full of strangers. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady but final. I've already called my lawyer. We're going to work out a repayment plan with specific terms and consequences. This isn't a family loan anymore. This is a legal debt. Carol's eyes went wide with something that looked like panic. Dad, you can't be serious. Lawyers? For family? You stopped treating me like family when you started treating me like an ATM with no withdrawal limits, I said. I worked 32 years, broke my back building houses, saved every penny for retirement. That money isn't play money for you to impress the in-laws. Tyler's jaw was working like he was chewing on words before spitting them out. This is insane. You're going to destroy this family over money. I'm not destroying anything, Tyler. I'm stopping the destruction you've already been doing. Every lie Carol told me, every dinner you shared on my dime while I ate microwave meals alone, every time you let me believe you were struggling while you were living better than I am, that's what's been destroying this family. I looked around the table at 4 adults who suddenly looked very young and very caught. You want to know what's insane? What's insane is that I was proud of how generous I'd raised Carol to be. Turns out I just taught her how to be generous with other people's money. I started to leave, then turned back one more time. Oh, and Carol, next time you want to cancel our dinner, just tell the truth. Sorry, Dad. We're spending your money on other people tonight. I'll appreciate the honesty. The ride home was quiet, not angry quiet, just clear. For the first time in months, I knew exactly where I stood with my daughter. And it wasn't where I thought it was, but at least now I knew. My phone started buzzing before I even pulled into my driveway. Text after text from Carol. Dad, please call me. You don't understand the whole situation. We need to talk. Tyler's parents are furious. I turned the phone off. 32 years in construction taught me when to walk away from a job site that's unsafe. This was one of those times. The next morning, I did what any good foreman does after a major screw-up on site. I called a meeting with the people who could fix the problem. But this wasn't going to be just Carol and me working it out over coffee. I called my lawyer buddy, Troy Bennett. Troy's been handling construction contracts for me for 20 years, helped me navigate insurance claims, worker disputes, the legal side of running crews. Time to treat this family mess like a business problem. Troy, I said over coffee at his office Monday morning, I need to know my options. If my daughter's been using my credit card without permission for non-emergency purchases, what am I looking at legally? Troy leaned back in his chair, the same way he did when contractors tried to explain why they were over budget and behind schedule. Bruce, technically speaking, it could be fraud, but you gave her the card voluntarily. Makes it harder to prove unauthorized use unless you can demonstrate she was using it outside the agreed terms. I slid the receipts across his desk like I was showing him inflated invoices. 11 steakhouse dinners when she told me she needed it for groceries and emergencies. She's been funding a lifestyle while lying about her financial situation. Is that outside the agreed terms? Troy whistled low as he flipped through the papers, the same sound he made when he saw how badly a subcontractor had messed up a foundation. I'd say that's pretty far outside. What do you want to accomplish here, Bruce? Are we talking criminal charges, civil recovery, or just scaring her straight? I thought about that question for a long time. Was I ready to treat Carol like any other person who defrauded me? In construction, when someone steals materials or inflates bills, you don't give them another chance to do it again. You protect yourself and make sure they understand there are consequences. I want my money back, all of it, and I want a written agreement about any future financial help. Clear terms, clear consequences, no more handshake deals based on family loyalty. I can draft a repayment agreement, Troy said, pulling out a legal pad. Specific terms, payment schedule, interest rate if you want consequences for non-payment. But Bruce, you sure you want to go this legal route with your daughter? This is going to change your relationship permanently. Troy, the relationship already changed. 6 months ago, when she decided lying to me was easier than being honest. I'm just making sure it doesn't happen again. He nodded slowly. Give me a week to put something together. That evening, Carol showed up at my door, alone this time. No Tyler, no Kyle to use as emotional leverage. She looked like she'd been crying, but she also looked determined, like she'd practiced what she was going to say. Dad, can we talk? I let her in, but I didn't offer coffee or settle into the living room like old times. We stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd stood 6 months ago with tears in her eyes asking for help. I'm sorry, she started, the words coming out in a rush. I'm sorry for lying, for using the card for things you didn't approve, for making you look foolish in front of Tyler's parents. Which part are you most sorry about? I asked. Lying to me for 6 months, Using my retirement money to impress the in-laws or getting caught? She flinched like I'd slapped her. All of it, but mostly. Mostly, I'm sorry for taking advantage of how much you love me, how much you wanted to help. That hit harder than I expected. Carol, your mother and I raised you better than this. We taught you that you work for what you want, you don't lie to get it. I know, she whispered. But Tyler was so embarrassed about losing his job and his parents. They have money, Dad. Real money. When they visit, it's always expensive restaurants talking about their investments, their vacation home. Tyler felt like such a failure in comparison. So you decided to fake success using my money. We told ourselves it was temporary, that Tyler would find another job, we'd pay you back, nobody would get hurt. I pulled out my phone and showed her the pictures I'd taken at Murphy's. This is you laughing with champagne while I'm home eating canned soup. This is Tyler wearing a watch that costs more than my truck payment. Where did that watch come from, Carol? Her silence was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady and final. My lawyer is drafting a repayment agreement, $4,200 plus interest paid back at $250 a month. That's about 18 months to make this right. Miss a payment and we explore other options. Her eyes went wide. Dad, you can't be serious. Lawyers, legal contracts, for family. You stopped treating this like a family matter when you started treating me like a bank that doesn't check statements. I worked 32 years to save that money, Carol. It's not play money for you and Tyler to buy respect from his parents. What about Kyle? She asked, tears starting again. What about your grandson? Kyle is my grandson no matter what choices his parents make, but that doesn't mean I'm going to fund those choices anymore. You want Kyle to learn values? Start by showing him that actions have consequences. 3 weeks later, Carol signed Troy's agreement. Tyler had to swallow his pride and take a night shift job at a warehouse, $15 an hour, not the management position he'd been holding out for, but honest work that paid actual bills. Carol picked up 3 more freelance clients, working nights after Kyle went to bed. They sold Tyler's gold watch to make the first payment. Rex and Beverly Murphy called me a month later. Beverly's voice was tight with embarrassment when I answered. Bruce, we wanted you to know we had no idea about the situation. We thought Tyler and Carol were doing well financially. They were doing well, Beverly. On my dime, we've talked to Tyler, made it clear this isn't how we raised him, and we want to pay you back for the dinners we attended. I appreciate the offer, but this is between Carol and me now. Though I'd suggest you start picking up your own checks when you visit. 6 months later, Carol had made every payment on time. She and Tyler moved to a smaller apartment, got Kyle into subsidized daycare, started living within their actual means instead of my means. Our monthly dinners resumed, but at Applebee's now, not Murphy's, and Carol paid her own check every time. Sometimes the people you love most need to learn that love isn't a blank check. It's earned through respect, honesty, and understanding that generosity has limits. I learned that being a good father doesn't mean saying yes to everything. Sometimes it means having the strength to say no until they remember how to value what you've given them.